Hi, we are live with another great sister webinar. I always say they're great. I'm not backing myself. I should back myself, and especially in this talk because we have amazing guests and experts on. And this one is a really good one, Gemma Stow, who I first heard talk down in Brighton, and she was amazing. Self-promotion expert and specialising in working with organisations to identify, develop, and retain their female talent. And before we went live, we were actually not laughing about how shit women are at backing themselves and how we get so embarrassed. And we've seen it massively in the sister group with people introducing themselves of what they do and who they are, and they go, oh, I feel silly saying this and I haven't really done much, and then they put this massive great CV on of what they've achieved, and they're totally overachievers. So I'm going to hand over to Gemma, who is basically going to cover everything about self-promotion is not a dirty word, and how, as women and some men out there, because we get men watching, should really hype my fuck out of ourselves and back ourselves. So yeah, over to you, Gemma.
Thank you, Emma. Great to be here. Really excited for this. So I'm here to talk about self-promotion is not a dirty word, and it's definitely not. And I'm hoping I can persuade you otherwise. And actually, it can be quite fun, right? So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Gemma Stow. Thanks for the intro, Emma. And I'm mad passionate, basically, about helping women to really own their expertise, step into their spotlight. And I help women to do that through, so they can progress in the career they want, ambitious women who have got big dreams, big goals. But we hold ourselves back, and we do this quite a lot. And there's a lot of research I'm going to talk about today around this. And I guess for me, my big picture mission really is all about, reducing the gender pay gap at work, having more women around decision-making tables. That's what it's all about for me. And there's this gap, this self-promotion gap, and I've written a white paper on that, and you can check that out there. But it's really interesting because on the one hand, we need to, it's not all about performance, it's about visibility. And on the other hand, women, like Emma said, are shit at it really, and we don't do enough of it. We don't big ourselves up enough. So we're going to explore that today. So the three things we're going to look at is why self-promotion is not a dirty word and how you can actually have fun. The other thing is we're going to look at why women hold back. And the reason I want to look at those areas, the things that come up the most in the work that I do, is because I want to maybe plant a seed or start a fire or something in you that you go, actually, that's me, that's what's stopping me. Maybe it's one thing, maybe it's all of them, or maybe it's not, maybe it's something different, which I'd love you to tell me about in the chat. And that's what we're going to do. And then the third thing is that we're going to start looking at the big V, and that's visibility and how you can be more visible and what you can do that actually feels good to you. Self-promotion needs to feel good, because if we feel so cringy, awkward and uncomfortable, we're not going to do it. We're just not going to have the motivation to. So it's really important to find your own way of doing things. And I specialize in working with more introvert personalities, actually, because a lot of women who I work with say, oh, I can't do that, I can't be visible. But it's not about being the loudest in the room. It's not. You can have subtle self-promotion. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I hope that sounds good. Brilliant. And I think I can see the chat. So if you've got any questions, I'll keep checking it. This is all new to me, which is an awesome setup. So please fire away in the chat. I'm sure there'll be Q&A at the end as well. So cool. So before we start then, I'd love to ask you, and let's see if the chat works. This would be great. What does self-promotion mean to you? I'd love to know, because when I talk to people about this, the things that come up are around arrogance, showing off, blowing your own trumpet, bigging yourself up, massive egos. And it's really interesting because before I came on, I thought I'd just have a quick look at what the definition is in the Oxford Dictionary, right? And you'll be surprised. Well, maybe you won't, actually. This is what it is, quote, the action of promoting or publicizing oneself or one's activities, especially in a forceful way, right? And the example they give is, she's guilty of criminally bad taste and shameless self-promotion. So is it any wonder that women and some men hate it? Absolutely detest self-promotion, because this is what we see, right, don't we? And I'm sure you all know somebody who actually quite likes to do it. There's always that person, and I guarantee everybody knows somebody like this. God bless them, but they love the sound of their own voice. They love talking about themselves. You've done one thing, they've done it 10 times better. And it's that kind of behavior that puts us off, because we don't want to, be seen that way. It's human nature to want to belong, to fit in. It's part of who we are, and we don't want to rock the boat. And when we see other people doing that, it's like, and you hear other people talking about them or how they love themselves. It's that kind of behavior that stops us from doing it, because we want to fit in, right? We don't want to push the boundaries. Well, sometimes we do, but it's that fitting in and that wanting to belong and worrying about what people think is a huge factor that holds us back from doing this. But the result is that we hide, right? And that's no good. We can't hide anymore. And that's what I'm all about. No more hiding. So my definition is slightly different, and it's more about owning your expertise, being seen and being heard, being able to share things, share your achievements, your results, and not feel awkward talking about it, and that actually it can feel more natural and more fun and exciting to talk about what we can do. And self-promotion for me is on so many different levels. It goes from speaking up in a meeting at work to maybe going on somebody's podcast and talking about what you've done and your success, right? There's so many things, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But first, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself, just to give you an idea of why I do this work, why I do what I do. And it's nearly 13 years ago now. And I left the probation service. I was a probation officer for a long time. And I worked with a lot of high-risk individuals, and I love that work. It's an amazing job, changing lives. It really is for a lot of people. But I had my daughter Matilda, and I decided I wanted to work with younger people, and I wanted to work for myself. More flexibility. I'm sure there's a lot of business owners out there that get that. And I remember finding this really dirty old warehouse. It was like 3,500 square feet, right, in Leeds. And I could see potential. And I remember being there with Matilda. She was 4 months old. She was in one of those slings on my chest here. And I remember the estate agent guy was stood next to me, looking me up and down. And he was saying, "You're going to do what?" And I'm like, "I'm going to build a business." But, I didn't know a lot about business, to be fair. I come from public sector. But I knew that you had to make more money than you spent, right? That was about it. And lo and behold, I did that. 8 years on from that point, we created this alternative education centre for young people who were not reaching their full potential in school, in mainstream. They're on the verge of being excluded. They came to us instead. I had a great team of staff. We won awards. It was amazing. But the reason I'm telling you all this is because with hindsight and looking back, I was hiding. I was hiding behind the brand. I was, hiding behind the business, and I convinced myself that that's where I should be. And I was totally underestimating my capabilities. And what I was doing was I had my staff, and I'd get them to go out and do the things that scared me or that I didn't think were for me to do. My personality, I'm a proud introvert. Things that were fundamental to the business, things like selling and presenting and networking and promoting, all those things. I was like, no, not for me. And like I said, I was, behind the brand. And I even remember, and I'll share this with you because it's a really good example of how we underplay our skills and who we are. I remember getting my first business cards made. And I remember, honestly, asking everybody I knew what I should call myself. Like, obviously not my name, but my role. And I knew I was MD. I was the managing director of the company. I'd started it. I'd built it. We had staff. It was huge. Huge for what I did. We had 15 staff at one point, and I was the MD. Yet something in me wouldn't let me put that on my business card. So in the end, I got them printed with centre manager because it felt safe. And I was so worried about, our clients, which were our schools ultimately, what they would think of me. Like, who is she? She's no MD. And it was so fascinating. And looking back, it feels crazy to me now. But at the time, it was a really, really tough thing for me to decide to do. And some people might resonate with that, but our names, our titles, our roles, and who we see ourselves are not always how other people do, and we really underestimate ourselves. So I wanted to just touch on, I promised that I'd talk about the ways women hide. And the reason I want to do this is, like I said, for you to kind of go, actually, maybe that is why I'm holding back. Maybe that is stopping me from doing what I want to do, from talking about myself, from putting myself out there. Because I know especially with all the women I work with and companies, the women are amazing at what they do. And I know you'll be amazing at what you do. You'll have the qualifications, the skills, and when you're doing your thing, you're flying. But talking about that and how good you are is a whole different ballgame, right? And what I've come up with 7 ways that I'm going to talk about women hide, and I've seen this firsthand with the women I work with. And the first one is perfectionism. So any other perfectionists in the house, raise your hand, like me. I'm not anymore as bad. It does raise its ugly head, but perfectionism is a huge thing for women. We hold back because we want everything to be just right. And it's impossible, because perfectionism, it actually doesn't exist, because it's so subjective. What you think's perfect won't be what I think's perfect. So we're putting this huge pressure on ourselves and this high standards to reach that we can never reach. And this is a massive thing that holds us back. The second one is fear of failure and that fear of rejection. So, for example, wanting to speak up in a meeting, but worried about what people will say, or wanting to post on LinkedIn, share some of your opinions and ideas, but worried that you'll get called out. People will say, "Who are you? You don't know what you're talking about." That fear is real. And we worry so much. And it goes back to what I was saying about wanting to fit in and belong and not rock the boat. We don't want people to start saying, "You don't know what you're talking about," because it taps into that insecurity of being good enough. And a lot of the time, this is there under the surface for a lot of women. Waiting for the right time is the third one. We do this. And I talk about this trap of being in the this then that trap. So you've got to do this before you can do that. So things like, I can't apply for this job until I've got that qualification, or I can't sell my these services because I've got to have my website ready, all these things. And I just wanted to mention this because we do it every day, not even just work, right? We can't do this before we do that. So now that I've planted that seed, it might just show you that actually, oh yeah, and it happens. And if you can notice it, then you can start doing something about it. That's the power, right? The fourth one is people pleasing. Any people pleasers? Yay, I'm sure there are, definitely. And that people pleasing is saying yes, mainly, when you want to say no. Saying yes to things when actually deep down you're like, I don't want to, actually, but we want to please people, we want people to like us, and we don't want to let them down, and we want to help, and all this stuff. And it can really hold us back when it comes to self-promotion, especially around where I find it the most is like stepping on people's toes. You don't want to upset your manager who has said no to something that you want to do, and you want to kind of circumvent him and go around and speak to someone else, but you're worried you're going to upset him, or you're not following protocol, so you can't. And that people pleasing really comes into play. So if that's something you recognize in yourself, let me know in the chat. On that note, as well, is language. I just wanted to mention it's really important. Language is so powerful. Now, this is not just the way we talk to ourselves in our head, which is very powerful, more powerful than we actually realize, I think, most of the time. But it's also the way we use words when we're communicating with other people. So, it can be really disempowering, is the point I want to make, and that I want you to start paying attention to the words you use. Now, I still do it. I'm still guilty of this because it's ingrained in us. We're conditioned in certain ways from a young age. But things like, using the word just. I literally have to look at my emails and take out words and edit it before I send it, because we really devalue and underplay ourselves with the language we use. Things like, another example could be, have you got a little bit, this will only take a little minute of your time, or it's just this, or my little business. And I see women using these words all the time that really underplay. And it comes back, it's a bit like the business card thing, right? We're worried about what people will think. We don't want to play too big, do we? What will people think of us if we do that? So it's interesting. I just wanted to mention that because, I want you to start thinking about, does language play a part in the way you communicate in a way that's disempowering to yourself? You're not giving yourself enough credit. The fifth one is overthinking. Now, overthinking is a huge one that happens a lot more than we realize, actually. I love my thinking time. I love my quiet time. I like to reflect, but I have to be super careful that it doesn't tip into overthinking. Maybe when you've got decisions to make, sometimes big decisions that can lead to overwhelm and this negative spiral. And then you end up being in a place where you can't even make simple decisions like what you're going to have for dinner, right? And it's really emotional. It can be really stressful. And it's just paying attention to how long you're spending on something and what is that about? Is it the worrying about what people think? You'll see this all the time, and you might have experienced this in meetings or training. You know, even the simplest of going around the room to introduce yourself. Oh, I remember it well. And by the time they got to me, I'd always wished they started with me first, but then didn't as well. And then I was always last. It felt like I was always last. And I had to wait a lifetime. They'd come around the room, and by the time they got to me, I'd forgotten my own name and what I did anyway, because I've been panicking so much about what I was going to say, overthinking, right? So if you've experienced that, let me know. A lot of women I work with do, and it comes up in so many different areas. So it's again, paying attention to what it is that maybe is getting in your way, this kind of self-sabotage that we do all the time to ourselves. The sixth one is a really interesting one, and it's about avoiding individual praise. Now, it was about a year ago. It was a year ago, February last year, when I was at a face-to-face event in York, and I was speaking there. And I remember a woman coming up to me after I talked about this thing about avoiding individual praise. And she came up and she said to me, something's just clicked. Now I realize what my manager is going on about all the time, because I'm forever saying we, and she's talking about a team. Now, don't get me wrong. This is a great quality to have in a leader, isn't it? You know, being able to be really inclusive, recognize your team, recognize the strengths and the achievements they've done and what you've done together and what you've got and the results you've got. But it's also so important not to miss out the bits that you did and say, I did this. I set that up so that they could do this, and really own it. And we don't do that, do we? We downplay it and we put ourselves, with the team. But actually, as a leader, you will have done some amazing things, and it's about owning that experience and expertise. Undervaluing expertise is the last one I wanted to talk about, and it's a crazy one. And as women, I find that we almost judge ourselves how we are right now. Yeah. So if someone says, oh, do you want to come on a podcast? We would look at ourselves right now and go, oh, God, I've never been on a podcast, so probably can't do that. What we do is we forget about everything that we've ever been through. We forget about the life experience, the work experience, qualifications, skills, even the negative stuff that we've been through, that's had a massive impact on who we are. Everything makes us who we are right now. Everything. And for some reason, it's like that all goes out the window. So, for example, like interviews, and the interviewer will say, oh, tell me of a time when you did so-and-so. And you'll be like, can't remember anything. Even though you've probably got 100 examples of that thing, it all goes out your mind. And I think it's really powerful to spend some time looking back and reminding yourself how bloody awesome you are, actually, and all the things you've achieved, all the obstacles you've got through. Things that you thought were going to kill you at one point, things that were taking over and consuming your life with trying to make a decision or, pushing through something that was really tough. And you did it. And then you've forgotten about that. So you need to remind yourself. Okay. I think it's really important too. And I wanted to just kind of put this into context a little bit. I've got a long fringe. Can't wait so we can get our haircut again, right? Let's talk about one of my clients, Claire. So just to put this into context. So she was working in this big accountancy firm, and all she had, these dreams, these ambitions, all she wanted to do was get to the board level. That's what she wanted. She'd been there 11 years. She was known as the brilliant team leader. Everybody loved her. She was a hard worker. She gave everything to the company. She loved the company, the values, the ethos, everything was aligned with who she was. But time and time again, she got overlooked, and she couldn't understand why. And when we delved a little deeper, it was really interesting, because it wasn't that the board didn't want her. It was the fact they didn't know that that's what she wanted. She'd never, ever talked about that, ever. She just hoped and prayed and assumed that she would get noticed, recognized for the hard work, and then rewarded with the promotion. And she'd started getting to the point where she was frustrated and resentful and looking elsewhere. And that didn't need to happen. It was just that, she needed to talk about it. It's really interesting. I was reading recently. how when men start, now this is a sweeping generalization, but there's research to back it up. When men start a job, say, they'll walk in on the first day and say, right, I'm going to have that corner office by the end of the year. Confident, know what they want, that's where they're going to go. And they'll tell everybody. So everyone knows, oh, so-and-so wants to be the boss by the end of the year. Right. A woman starts a job. Oh my God, the thought of even saying that on your first day would make you cringe, right? Isn't it interesting? Why don't we do that? There will be women that do. There will be. And, awesome. But you don't have to be like that. But what I'm saying is it's important to talk about what you want. And this is a really interesting one when it comes to introductions too. So a top tip, if you're introducing yourself, even more so now because it's virtually, right? It does feel different. There's no doubt about it. But we often just default to that, who you are and what you do. But it's really interesting when you're meeting new people to talk about what you want as well. Because, if you're saying, oh, what I really want is to grow my business and work with these types of companies, or really focusing on HR, or that person could then say, oh, well, I know somebody in that. So do you want me to make that connection? If you don't ever say, if you just say, this is me and what I do, then they'll never know where you're going. And it's the same thing. So it can come up in so many different places, right? Let me know any thoughts you've got on this. Oh, I'm going to have a look at those in a minute. So if you are listening to me and you're thinking, yep, this is me, I recognize all those 7 things, or 1 or 2, and you're thinking, I hate promotion, I can't do it. I'm good at what I do. I know I am deep down. Maybe some days you don't even feel that. And it's about building that self-belief. But your client's feedback or your manager gives you great feedback, and, you get this sense of, yeah, I know what I'm doing. But you just can't talk about yourself. You find it really awkward. You're not alone with that, right? I did some research and I did it for men and women, which was really interesting. And it was about 86% of the participants said they hated self-promotion. And because it makes them uncomfortable and awkward, they would avoid it completely. And that included men. But the only difference with men, when I looked through the results, was they didn't like it either, but they still did it. Whereas women didn't like it, so they didn't do it, which is really interesting, isn't it? And because it makes us feel so cringy, we just don't do it and we avoid it. So I want you to start thinking about ways that you can do this in a fun way. This can be fun, I promise. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute, which is a bit random on a live, but I'm okay with that because, silence is powerful. And I'm going to give you a minute. And if you can put in the chat, I'm going to just have a look at the chat as well. Oh, and I'm going to drink my drink. This is really good, by the way. And I know they're sponsoring Gibson's. It's a really nice drink. So I'm going to have a drink of that. But first, I want you to just take a minute. And if you've got a pen and paper, even better, or your phone or whatever, just take a minute and think about what stops you. What stops you from being more visible or speaking up or talking about yourself? And if you put time, fine, but dig a little deeper. Because time is one of those things that comes up a lot. Yes, we've all got the same amount of time. Yes, we've all got a lot of precious time that we need to use in different areas in our lives. But, we all use it as an excuse as well, right? I haven't got any time to do that, when actually underneath that is a little bit of fear, something that's stopping you. So just take a minute while I have a drink of this lovely drink and write down what it is. And you don't have to share it. This can just be for you. Great comments. Oh, I like that, Hannah. Telling people what you do and why you can help. Nice. Where's my profile? Brilliant. Yep, Daniela. I just wanted to ask. I know. Take out the just. I want to ask. So different, right? Crazy. Thanks, Deborah. That's brilliant for sharing. Yes. Lack of confidence in my own ability stops me getting myself out there. It's really interesting, isn't it? So that's what I was saying before about how we know we're good, but then our lack of confidence in it, to talk about it. Sometimes that can be around not having done it for a while or being new to something as well can really get in the way. So thank you for sharing. Embarrassed to look as arrogant. I know arrogance comes up so much when I'm talking to women about this. So it's about finding a way that doesn't feel arrogant and feels comfortable. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Hierarchy in my organisation, scared to be seen, to be speaking out of turn. Yes, stepping on people's toes, rocking the boat. And sometimes we might have seen other people do that and it's not had a great consequence, right? So that's going to put us off. But there are ways of doing it because we can't just not do it because we're scared of that, because we miss out on opportunities from hiding and holding back. She's on a cross trainer. Amazing. My hero. I love that. You're on a cross trainer and you're doing this. Powerful stuff, right? I love it. Thank you for commenting too. So I hope you've all got something down there. I hope that was helpful, because there's never been a more important time to speak up and shout out, especially working from home, remote working, everything's online. You're not bumping into people in the corridors at work. You're not getting a coffee in the kitchen and chatting and overhearing conversations. It's so different, but it doesn't mean you can't still be visible. So I want you to just think about, how could you raise your visibility? This is what we're going to look at now, okay? And I'm just going to make sure I've got enough. Yeah, I think I've got enough power to keep me going. Let's hope it don't cut me off. Emma would not be pleased. Now, what I want you to do is, as we're thinking about how you can start doing this in your own way. I know a lot of people talk about comfort zones, right? And pushing out of your comfort zone, and the magic is on the outside of your comfort zone and all this, which is great. It's all great stuff, right? But there's a lot to be said for staying within your comfort zone too. Now, hear me on this, because when we need motivation to do something that actually we're really scared of, or we actually hate, or we think we're going to be arrogant, or all those things, bragging, showing off, we need some motivation to do it. We need to give ourselves the reason why. And if we're pushing out of our comfort zone all the time, it's not going to happen. So start within your comfort zone. So what I want you to think about now is, what are your strengths? Now, I love this question, because when I ask women this question, they always go, not sure, don't know. And what I always do with my clients is I get them to go and ask other people so they can see themselves as others sees them, I think that's such a powerful thing. And people are so surprised. Yes, they feel a bit cringy doing it in the first place, but once they get the feedback, it's amazing. So if you really struggle with identifying your own strengths, do that. But for this exercise, I want you to think about where your strengths lie. So for example, if you love writing, if writing fills you up, then there's so many ways you can start being more visible and you can start promoting yourself. If it's in an organization, newsletters, if they don't have a newsletter, start one, or get a section of it or something and start writing. Even emails, writing emails to people who you want to notice you, letting them know what you've been up to. It can't hurt, right? Anything writing an article for an industry-specific magazine, online, offline, writing a book, writing blogs. There's so many things that you could look at doing and doing more of, because it's your strength. Now, writing might not be your strength. You're thinking, Christ, no, that's not for me. I love talking. You might love talking. So think about how you can do that. You can get in touch with networking events. You can go and do speaking like I am today. You can get in touch with podcasts. You can do your own videos and talk on there. There's so many different things, but start with what you're really good at, because you don't have to do what everybody else is doing. You don't have to look and go, well, Facebook Lives are working for them, so that's what I need to do. If I'm going to make my business a success, or if I'm going to get noticed at work, I better start doing videos on LinkedIn. But you hate videos and they make you cringe. You'll never do them. And if you do them, it won't bring the real you. Not yet. It could be something for later on. So what I'd love you to do, and you can, you do this afterwards, and it's a great exercise, is to write down, really think outside the box, everything you can think of that would help you be more visible. Everything, even, speaking out at meetings, even chairing meetings. I had one woman who could never speak out. She was just so nervous about talking. So we ended up getting her to chair the damn meeting, because then everyone would listen to her when she spoke, right? And she was in control. It worked. It was amazing. There's always ways of looking at different things. So from speaking in meetings to being on a TEDx talk, whatever it is, you write it down, and then you go through it. And if you're really creative like me and you like pens, I've got so many different color pens, you can use colors or whatever, but go through and use these 3 key areas really, right? The first one, yeah, that's my comfort zone. I can do that. That's easy. Second, that's your stretch. That's going to stretch me, but I can do it. It feels okay. Third, no, scary as hell. I'll never do it. And just go through and then start with the ones that feel comfortable and just start. And that's how you start building up your visibility. So I'd love to know what people would think. What would you put in your comfort zone? Because it'll be so different to some other people. Let me know. And I'm going to check that in a minute. But what I was going to say is this links really closely to personal branding. Now, you've probably heard that term thrown around so much, and it seems to be everywhere I look. And it is important. There's no doubt about it. We often associate it with companies, marketing, that kind of thing, when actually personal branding is important for everybody, especially, women who are, ambitious, have got plans for the career, working within an organization. You still need to stand out, and you can do that in your own way, but it's really important to know who you are first. Now, for me, personal branding, the way I define it, and this might be something you want to write down to remind yourself or come back to later, is that, what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? And I think that's really powerful, because are you doing enough to tell them? If so-and-so, somebody Joe Blogs, is in a room talking to John Smith, and John Smith says, oh, I'm really looking for someone to come and help the women. We've got women who are really capable at work. They're just not confident when it comes to interviews. They just don't sell themselves. I'd really want Joe Blogs to be saying, well, you want to speak to Gemma Stow because she's excellent at helping women do that. And it'll really close your gender pay gap because you'll get more women around the table. That's what I want him to say. So what have I done to make sure that he knows exactly that? And I want you to ask the same question of yourself. How can you get people who you want to know about you and what they're going to say about you when you're not in the room, right? What time are we on? Have we got time to just quickly share? I think we've got time. Quickly share to 7 things to think about with personal branding. Figure out who you are, your values, so important. Values basically are what matters most to you. And that's really important. Actually, it's good work to do when you're looking at the reasons that hold you back with self-promotion, because values are a bit like magnets and they pull you and push you in different ways. And it's really important to look at those and figure them out, because they're the core values of who you are, right? The second thing is decide what you want to be known for, which is what we just touched on. The third thing is practice introducing yourself. Now, we talked about introducing yourself. Practice, when I say practice, I mean it. I mean, record yourself on your phone, right? Talk to yourself in the mirror. Nail it. Feel comfortable with it and confident with it. Really own it. It does make such a difference. You'll just be default then. You'll never have to worry about it again. The fourth thing is research your industry, follow and connect with people you really want to make those connections with. Come up with your top 5 people. Who do I want to connect with? Who do I need to know about me? Maybe it's within your company already. Maybe it's in an industry, whatever. But connect on purpose. Find them on purpose. And that links to the 5th one, which is embrace networking. Now, so many people, especially more introverted personas, like, I hate networking. Hate it. I don't want to do it. But if you just replace the word networking with connecting, makes all the difference, right? Everybody loves to connect with people, and that's all you're doing. You're building relationships. And that networking and connecting is one of the strongest, most awesome ways to build your visibility. It's that personal branding piece, getting those people to know exactly what you do so they can be, they can talk about you and introduce you on your behalf when you're not even there. Perfect, especially in the virtual world. And the 6th thing is building your reputation and credibility. And you can do that through so many different ways. We've talked about blogging, being a guest expert. Even if if you're listening to me and you work for a company, this is for you too, right? I've had clients who have got to directorship now because of the panels that they've been asked to attend, because they up their game on LinkedIn and people know about them and what they're passionate about, and they've got new clients for their company. It's been amazing. And that's all because they embraced their own visibility and started talking about themselves more. And then the seventh thing is self-promotion your way. It's so important to do it in a way that feels good to you. I'm not about pushing women into doing things they don't want to do. It's not that at all. That's so disempowering. I'm on about building you up. You want to have quick wins. Quick wins are the things that build your confidence. You've got the confidence already. It's just about unlocking it. All right. So you can't be a secret and a success. Just what happened. Okay. So if you want that career, you've got an idea of where you want to be, then go out there and tell people about it. Show them what you've got, what you're capable of. Wave your flag. Self-promotion isn't a dirty word. You can have so much fun with it. And if you're on LinkedIn, come and connect with me because I love it over there. It's one of my favorite platforms now. Didn't used to be, but I absolutely love it. So yeah, so there you go. So I hope that's been helpful. Let's have a look through the chat and see, has anyone got any questions?
I've had a few come in.
Cool.
What have they said? And a couple of people asked as well, is that messaging that, part of it is the messaging we've had since we were little of not being assertive, not being bossy. You still there?
Emma?
Can you hear me now?
Am I back?
Yeah.
Oh,
part of it is the that messaging we've had since we were little about you not being bossy, not being opinionated, not being aggressive, which is part of it, because you just think as soon as you open your mouth or want to say something, you go, oh, they think I'm a dick. Yeah, I have that all the time. I've learned to override it, but it took a long time. But a few people are, what are your advice on, like, a lot of people have daughters, on what the language you use around kids, and also boys, because you want them to allow the girls to have that voice without turning around and saying you're so bossy. So yeah,
and I find it with my own kids, because I've got a daughter who's 12 and a son who's 8, and I have to be really careful when I'm speaking, because I'm like, oh, like if he's showing off, it feels like he's showing off in front of his mates, maybe he's gaming or whatever, and I'm like, oh, you can't say that. And I'm thinking, no, I don't want him to be conditioned to thinking he can't talk about how good he is at it, because he is good at it. So let's do it, but do it in a way that feels okay and that's not going to come across as that arrogance. It's a really hard balance. Was there a question I missed when I cut out before?
Was any tips? Yeah, any tips on the language you use for daughters?
For daughters, I guess it's using the positive. So you see those people talk about, instead of bossy, use leadership, and maybe just looking at reframing the words that would normally come out of your mouth and changing them into something else. And it's about self-awareness as a mother too, I think, and as a father especially as well, to recognize what words you're using and the impact that can have, and maybe talking with your daughters as well about what different words mean to them would be really interesting, because I see a lot of difference in the generation coming through, and I think companies are as well, that women are starting to have higher standards maybe than the shit that we put up with for a long time, which is great, and I'm really excited to see that, but we've got to keep that going, because it's education, when they're younger. I still see that now, even in primary schools now, which frustrates the hell out of me.
And there's also that it's having each other's backs, isn't it? It's being aware of the women around you and knowing if they are holding themselves back. So if you're in a boardroom situation or in a meeting and you know that one of your colleagues, who's also female, actually has a lot to say, of just giving them a nudge.
Yeah, exactly.
In speaking,
yeah, exactly. And I see companies who are really up for this, and they're creating platforms that feel safe for women to do that, and having women's networks and supporting each other. And also, male allyship is so important as well, for men to do that in those meetings. I recently had a woman who was asked to take the minutes because she was the only woman on the virtual meeting. She was like, no, I'm not going to take them. Someone else do it. And another guy stepped up, and afterwards she said to him, why did you pick me? And he's like, you're right, I shouldn't have. And it's those planting those seeds and having men on board to support us as well as us doing it.
It's the classic, isn't it? Making the tea in a conference room. Actually, it's something we would automatically go to do, because that's what we do as women. So I've done that a few times, gone into things and automatically gone and in autopilot to go, does anyone want a cup of tea? And I've gone no in my head, and I've sat down and thought, no, I'm going to wait. I love it. Until a man says you want a cup of tea.
Exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's so conditioned in us We have to really work at noticing this in ourselves so that we can actually do something different. Otherwise, we just do the default of getting up and making everyone a cup of tea. And it's not just work, it's at home as well, you know, it's that nurturing, and it takes over, doesn't it? It's crazy.
Exactly. We're more than tea.
Yes, we are definitely more than tea or coffee.
Cool. And finally, just one more question. But how do you be tips on being assertive, but also being polite? Because that's the other thing. It's like, and even though most of the time we're not being assertive, we're just being slightly kind of strong with our opinions.
Yeah.
But feeling like you're being polite at the same time, that kind of mix.
That's a good one. It's a great question. I think it's to do with language, to be honest. And there's ways of saying things, isn't there? And I think we've been taught as well to make the other person feel good so that they listen to us. But it's being really careful about that, because we can really undervalue ourselves at the same time. So it's about using the language. So I think someone put in the chat about, they say, I just want to talk about this or something, and just take the just out and say, I want to talk about this. That's assertive enough, I think, without, it tips it into assertive and not aggressive, but from the submissive kind of, is it okay? Have you got time? Am I worthy? Do you know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
That's the thing. As long as you're being kind and you know you're being nice, there's nothing malicious. Then you can be as strong as you want. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And respond to that as well. Just
finally, I've just seen one in which I think actually affects a lot of women, is the feeling intimidated by younger girls coming through, and that sort of having your, you know, knowing your worth, and actually you've got 20 years on them, and that experience you've got in those 20 years, and backing yourself on that front.
It's really interesting. I was on a workshop the other day, and a lady said to me, I see myself as a old grey-haired big lady, and that's what everyone else sees. And I had to kind of hold the mirror up and say, look, if you're seeing that, that's what you're portraying. That's what you think everyone's seeing. That's not what everyone's seeing. So it's about doing that inner work on yourself and owning it. And yes, it can be intimidating, but rather than comparing yourself, looking for inspiration instead, and collaboration. Women are so powerful at that, rather than that competition. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's about that work. Yeah.
And own the grey, like I am at the moment.
Own the grey.
It's strong. It's strong, but I'm going to own it.
Yeah, it's coming through. My fringe is so long, I won't be able to see soon. But my husband took it in the last lockdown, and I thought he was going to stick it in the scissors in my eyes. So I think I might have to just do it myself this time.
I'll go orange. If I try and do mine, it's going to go orange. So, but you know what? We're going to, unless anyone has any last minute questions, but feel free, as Gemma said, she's all over LinkedIn. So stalk her, hit her up, message her if you need it. And just final thank you to these guys, Gibson's Goodology. We've got 25% off for anyone watching this. They do actually taste really nice. They don't taste crap.
Really
CBD infused wellness drinks. They're great.
How many can I drink?
Oh, Deborah Bennett, 52 and no grey. Get off this webinar.
I love that. Awesome, rocking it.
Exactly. 42 and grey here. Anyway, I will love you and leave you all. And thank you very much, Gemma. That was amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great to see you.